Welcome to the Pivot Point podcast. This season, I'm focused on sharing stories and ideas from experts on diversity and inclusion. In this episode, I will share some insights and ideas from my guest expert, Erica Young. Together, we will leave you with some actionable tips to think about and discuss with your organization. We share this information because inclusive leadership is a journey. It requires bravery and courage, and you do not have to do it alone. At Pivot Point, I believe we are stronger together. We are one. So, we're going to introduce you to Erica. I have had the privilege of working with Erica, for the last 3 or 4 years. We have been connected as authors in the Central Indiana community. And most recently, over the last year and a half or so, we have gotten engaged in conversations about diversity and inclusion. So, Erica is an African American who is getting more involved and active in the diversity space. By day, she's a financial coach and helps couples and people wrestling with debt to get out of debt and to be financially free. And she is incredibly gifted with knowing your money story. I've personally experienced this and learned quite a bit about my own money story. And most recently, we've been partnering together on privilege and unpacking privilege and leading and facilitating workshops together. So I'm so thrilled to have you, Erica. I always enjoy talking to you so much. Welcome to the
Thank,
podcast.
thank you so much, Julie. It's a pleasure. Happy to be here.
Well, let's start with your why. You have a day job, but you've
Yes.
been able to weave in D&I into your day job a little bit, as well as I know you're leading some community efforts on this. So fill us in. How'd you get into this? What sparked your interest?
Well, it's interesting. First of all, kids will spark interest in a lot of stuff for you. I didn't know I was going to be a band mom and love marching band until I had a child who got involved, right? So part of my interest in diversity and inclusion is my kiddos, my daughters who are 16 and 20 currently, and the conversations they come home with. That piece right there is huge. And me feeling like there were some things that I needed to, one, educate myself on, and two, get more involved in to make a difference. Because if I wasn't in this space helping my kids have a better future, then I'm not doing enough. So that's one reason. Socially, though, and how this came outside of my front door is that I actually watched a Red Table Talk with Jada Pinkett Smith. And some friends of ours, we were all kind of texting each other, oh my gosh, did you see it? What did you think? Blah, blah, blah. And it was talking about women and race. And we all got super interested. And then on Facebook, a couple of friends mentioned it. And then it just started this whole thing of what if we brought something like this to the community? Now, we don't have a red table, but we did sit in a circle, and we do this every month now, where we just have some of the tough conversations around diversity, inclusive behaviors, racial identity. One really neat thing we're going to do, we've done some 23andMe testing on ourselves. So in January, we're going to discuss the results and how it made us feel, how we identify, what came up for us as we looked into our true DNA. And it's just so interesting forming relationships with people, but also creating a dialogue that is safe so that people can ask some tough questions or experience something different, or go into a space with a new person who is of a different race from you and experience what they experience. And so I'm really enjoying it. We're having a good time, making friends, and talking about some tough stuff, but getting through it and figuring out how we can expand this more into our community. And we do conversations with our mayor and roundtables and other spaces now. And so it's really neat to see how word spreads and people get excited about having a culture and a community that truly is not only diverse, but including all people.
Yeah, I love that. The why being children. It's something I've become increasingly aware of and passionate about, having a 5-year-old that, says things like, his skin is a different color than mine, or,
Yeah,
so-and-so has two moms. And it's like, I think as parents, we kind of freeze like, oh, let's not talk about that. But we
exactly.
really should be talking about that proactively with our kids so that they don't think that race and difference is something to be shushed, right? It's something
Right.
to be discussed and to make sure that all voices are heard and that people are included. So I love that that was a catalyst for you.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, I've had the opportunity to participate in one of the community discussions, and I thought it was fascinating. I remember the comment, like a comment that was made because it was a very mixed, racially group. And someone saying, I feel excluded as a white person when
Mm,
only people of color get together. And I remember,
right.
I remember you handled it so beautifully, but that's a real, I think, perception
Yeah.
of people in the majority group that don't understand what it's like to be underrepresented every single day.
Sure. Well, and I will tell you this, to that person's point, that's the reason why our real talks were started, because it could easily have been a bunch of Black women getting together, having talks about race, but where are we going to get ourselves? We're just probably going to get upset and frustrated and take it nowhere. And so we were really trying to be intentional about inviting people that we thought, you know, we wanted to either get to know better or had a different political view than us, or we heard something they said and we were like, they might be interested in this. And so we wanted to make certain that we didn't create yet another circle where someone else was excluded. But the other part of this is that we need to create safe spaces.
Mhm.
And I think the reason for the comment was because, you know, a lot of the time, I mean, if you're walking down the street with an African American guy, especially, and they do the head nod to another guy who's African American, it's a sign of respect and camaraderie just to know, hey, I see you.
Mm,
And to have circles where we are seen, most of the time, that's going to be when it's just us. Right. And
mhm.
so a lot of other people don't get that because we're constantly the minority everywhere that we go. And to have a place that's safe to let your hair down and to just hang out without feeling like you have to continue to explain your differences is
Mhm.
why those inner circles, let's say, can exist.
Yep.
But I will say that I have been actually more intentional, and and I'm so glad that being in this work has helped me to look at my own life and say, Erica, where are you being exclusive to? And to make sure that my circles are diverse and those of my kids are diverse, and that it's not just about advancing Black people, for
Mhm.
instance. It's about making certain that all people are in the room, and that
Mhm.
it takes intention. It really does, and takes intention on everybody's part.
Well, I have so many questions to follow up to that. Um, one of the things that you've really taught me through us connecting and working together in workshops is, that we've talked a lot about privilege, and that comes from different vantage points. And what I like about your approach is it's not just advancing one dimension of diversity like race. There's so many intersectional experiences to it.
Yeah,
There's race, there's gender, your abilities, your sexual orientation. I mean, there's so many wrinkles to diversity. So making sure that we're covering all the aspects and not just advancing one part of that. So one of the things you taught me that I took an inventory of my network almost 2 years ago now. I'm proud. I'm
hmm
a couple years into this journey. But, as somebody that was talking about gender equality and very focused on women's leadership, and I still am now, but I'm much more broader in the intersections and the overall D&I pieces to it. And I took an inventory of my network, and I wasn't very proud of what it looked like. I mean, it was
right.
very white, very woman focused,
Yeah,
business owners, mid-career mothers. Like, holy smokes, I'm basically surrounding myself with people just like me.
right,
And I often share this story, especially if I'm talking about something like race, where I want to be an ally, I desire to be an ally, but I am white. I
right.
acknowledge that right from the get go. And I often share the story of you and how I went to you and said, "Hey, Erica, I got to do better, right?
Yeah,
Help me,
right,
please. This isn't your burden. I need you."
right, right.
And you were so kind to say, "Well, I know so and so, and have you tried this? And have you tried that?" And it's really tangible ideas. So for somebody, allyship is in the eye of the beholder. You can't
Yes,
claim to be a white ally, a male ally, whatever ally you want to be. But as somebody that I'm hoping every day to be on the journey to being an ally, especially on an integral part of our diversity with race. What do you recommend to white people to engage and to get better at this stuff?
Ooh, that's such a good question. The very first word that comes to mind is be authentic. And then secondly, be curious.
Hmm.
And then thirdly, be intentional. So if you are authentically you and you're really like, okay, you know what? I just need to let you know that this is where I am on this journey. I'm having a hard time with this, or this is what I'm curious about, or, can I come with you? Can I do this with you?
Hmm.
Get to know people. Don't have a hidden agenda and don't assume anything. And I think that's, you know, authenticity is huge. In this process, I had a girlfriend of mine that our kids have grown up together in the last 7 years. And I always consider her friend, always. But in the last year, I feel like there were some smoke screens that got taken down because we were just honest.
Hmm.
And she was honest. And sometimes that vulnerability is hard. And so we were able to get closer because of the authenticity, and the curiosity was not shut down by either party. And being intentional, with your time, and just saying, okay, how can I move into, is it okay for me to come with you into this circle, go to a different church, take
Yeah.
your kids to a different playground? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
make certain that you're coming outside your box. But it actually takes work to do that, because we're creatures of habit. We want to do the same thing over and over again. And if we do the same thing over and over again, we might never see anyone different from us. And
Hmm.
as you stated, you do this work all the time. And when you do the same things over and over again, you were going to be around the same, moms who are business owners who are white, right?
Yep.
And so to be intentional means to do something that's different. And I challenged one of my best friends on this. I really did, because I was curious. And I went to her website, and she's a white female mom. She fits your demographic for sure, right? And business owner, definitely a business owner. And so I looked at her website of the people that she had hired, and she had 12 pharmacists on her team. All of them looked like her. And if they didn't, it was because they didn't have blonde hair, they had brown hair. And I said, I love you, but I need to understand why you don't have a diverse workforce.
Mm.
And she explained some things to me, but I still challenged her to say, people that look like me are going to look at your website and think they aren't welcome.
Yep. Yep.
And I have that space with her where that conversation can happen. But it wasn't until I really got curious about being an inclusive community that conversation became important for me to have with her. And I think that that's something we can all go inward and say, what am I doing that can be perpetuating
Hmm.
an exclusive type of society? And that is what we need to work on improving.
Yeah. Well, this curiosity you were demonstrating, one of the techniques you recommend is to come in and be curious, like, help me understand.
Right.
Right? And
Yeah.
I think sometimes we're so afraid of saying something like that or calling
Yeah.
somebody out because we're going to offend them. As women, we don't want to damage the relationship,
Yeah.
so we end up skirting around it. But, someone I often think like they need to know, right?
For transparency's sake, I'll tell you, it was not overnight. Like, I just asked my best friend that question. Like, that was a super good and important conversation, but we didn't get there
Hmm.
initially. Like, it took a minute for me to figure out when the right moment was and the right words are. And because she's a really great friend of mine, she received it in love. But like, it wasn't, and I listened to what she had to say. I didn't come with all the rebuttals, right? Her experience is her experience. And actually, it's interesting because when you do ask those questions or get curious, I learned something. She said, I've tried to be, have a more diverse workforce, and I've come across this barrier and I haven't figured out how to get beyond it. And I
Mhm.
thought that was interesting. And it's going to continue to make me think, because that's it's important to know why sometimes our efforts towards having a diverse workforce can
Mhm.
sometimes be even more challenging than we expected.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear excuses like, I try, but they don't apply. Oh my gosh, I go to places and, I just can't get the interest in the positions, or, hey, we're a male dominated industry. There's a lot of
Right.
white people in our industry. Like, I promise you, there are diverse people,
Yes.
diverse groups of people, places. Like, you just have to change your technique.
Right.
But yeah, to go in with swinging, you're only going to give her the choice to be a defensive back. So, how do you kind of
Right.
gently nudge? And it's like you said, it's a continual conversation,
Yep.
which I think that's the journey I've been on with you too, is, I was afraid to ask questions about race, initially, because it didn't feel right as a white person to be like, "What is it like to be Black?"
Yeah. Right.
That's a big question. And I think that's okay, 'cause the lesson you taught me with this is, Julie, you've earned the right to ask those
Mhm.
types of questions now.
Mhm.
Had you come in initially asking those questions, that would not have felt good to me, right? How am I
Right.
supposed to
Right.
represent the entire Black experience?
Right. Exactly. And I also think too that, you know, I think it's important to allow relationships to happen. Like, don't, because you're different, don't get nervous or scared. I think it's okay to say, you know what, this is different. Like, I haven't had a friend like you before. And
Mhm.
that breaks down barriers too. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I appreciate that you know, you allowed the friendship to occur. And I think that when people hear that, they're more open to say, okay, because we may all be feeling the same way. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so I think sometimes it's easy for us to find ways to weasel out of it. And it just isn't productive to do that.
No. No, it isn't. Yeah, and it reminds me too of the conversations we've had about white fragility.
Yes.
There's an excellent book out there that Erica told me about, and I read it. I listened to it on a car ride that very weekend, and oh my
Yes.
gosh, as somebody that considers myself aware and active in this space, I was blown away.
Yeah.
And so, for our listeners that haven't read the book, highly recommend it. It's I know D'Angelo is the author's last name, and is written by a white woman, which is interesting in itself. But she just talks about basically white fragility as the fear of white people to talk about race. It's the
Mhm.
dismissal of racism, even, it's, oh, slavery was over 150 years ago, those kind of statements, that just dismiss that it's still happening today. And you and I know there's tons of evidence that it's happening today, whether it's redlining or just going to the grocery store and looking at who's
Yeah.
there in your community.
Right. Yeah.
We're still very segregated as a society. It's not enforced legally, but there are invisible boundaries now that she makes you very well aware of. And once you become aware of that, it's really hard to unsee it. But
Mhm.
you and I are constantly working with people that don't get it yet, that aren't going to
Yes.
read that book.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I just read an article yesterday. I used to live in Arizona, and JP Morgan Chase is out there. I guess I'm putting their name out there now, huh? But the
That's
article's
okay.
out there, so it's fine. But there was a gentleman who was an ex-football player who has tons of money. He's got millions, couple $1 million, right? Let's say. And so that would, in any bank, cause him to be a private client. He should, over a certain threshold of investable assets at most investment firms or banks, you get a different level of service. And he was not ever put into that private client group.
Mm,
Um, he inquired, because the way that you are taken care of is in fact different. They are trained to treat you a little bit better and give you better service,
yep.
because you have more investable assets, and that is obviously more lucrative for them. But he was never put there.
Mm,
And I won't go into all the details of the story. Obviously this was an African American guy, but he had money, and he went where he was close to. Right. He may not have had another referral or what have you, because he didn't have a specific advisor to go to. He was just going to his local bank to invest his assets, and was never given the opportunity to have that stellar service that was required for a person with his net worth.
mm,
And was told by some of the the couple people on the lower end of the totem pole why that the color of his skin was holding them back from doing business with him.
Wow. So that's like a conscious bias.
It is. And so it's interesting how people say that it doesn't happen anymore. This is so in the past. And, it's not, because it isn't happening to you,
Yep.
doesn't mean that it isn't happening.
I love that.
And so
that's a great quote.
yeah. And it didn't happen to me, for instance, but I cannot deny his experience and how frustrating that must have been. For him to not only witness, but, for it to be perpetuated, I think, internally.
And
so
I
I
almost
just
accepted too. Like
it was accepted. Absolutely. And that's why the gentleman who was, like I said, a little lower on the totem pole, who was letting him know that this has been done before, he knows why he's not getting the treatment he needs is because of the color of his skin. I thought, wow, you're not even trying to help keep this from happening. Like, you're just allowing him to go elsewhere, take his business elsewhere, I guess. But he really wanted to see if they would do it, justice, that if they would actually reverse the behavior and cause, positive action to occur, and they didn't. And so it's just interesting how this just occurred this summer, and we're, continuing to say that racism isn't there. I mean, it happens all the time.
Well,
and people could even dismiss that and say, well, he should just take his business elsewhere. Well, how are we doing better if that's what really happens? How are we holding people
hold the burden?
Yes. Oh, he's got options. Well, so how are we going to, what is that for the next person? Is that what we're going to continue to do?
Well, and it's interesting. JP Morgan Chase, as an example, does a great job with gender. I mean, they're still not quite there at the senior ranks, but they do have some great strategies with gender. But it goes to show you, holistic approach. You need to be addressing all of these.
Exactly.
And the PR challenges. I mean, Starbucks had that racial issue a couple years ago too.
Yep.
Everyone heard about that. So there's big time liabilities associated with not getting these things right.
Exactly.
And what I find, Erica, is you and I are up to date on the articles and the things that are happening in the Netflix specials. It's the people that aren't willing to get into the data that we struggle with, right? How do we educate the people that aren't willing to educate themselves? And, I often share with people, I think most people do want to learn more. They just don't know how, and they're so afraid of saying and doing the wrong thing. So if we could safely nudge them to tools, and I know you've had a challenge with one of your friends in this area.
Yes,
I have several friends of mine that their parents, they're really struggling with their parents. Because they're saying and doing things that are very racially biased or even somewhat racist in commentary. And my suggestion is, there are several Netflix specials that if you just say, hey, would you mind watching this and tell me what you think about it?
Sure.
And the one about the 13th Amendment I found to be very powerful. There's a few others that you've turned me on to. So like, I guess, what would you recommend to the people don't get it yet? How can we like segue them in safely? What are some tangible, small baby steps they can take?
Well, what's interesting? I think that there's a couple of levels. Now, you can correct me on this, but there's the person who truly is curious, who's interested in learning. And then there's also the person who is thinking that we're in la la land and this was so long
like
ago.
Apathetic, complete dismissal, different than somebody that's like, no, I mean, I just don't get it yet.
Right. So I have had challenges with people who are apathetic, even trying to get them to read and do, watch a special or what have you, and come to a meeting. They'll come to a meeting, but try and stand their ground in the meeting versus be open. Right. That is difficult and it's exhausting. Like, there's a big time fatigue that occurs if you are
not a good use of your time to if they don't want to be educated, no matter what you do, and you're going to get exhausted. And you and I have talked about compassion fatigue in this work. You got to pay attention to your energy and spend it with the people that want to get it.
That's right. So that's a more challenging endeavor. And like you said, it's exhausting. But if they're curious, I think I mean, I love resources like books and entertaining things like a movie. And one of the things that I do now is, okay, let me take a friend with me to go see a movie. Like, let's go see Harriet and then have a conversation
Mm-hmm.
afterwards. You know, um, walk the path with them versus just say, oh, do this. You know what I mean? Do all
That's
these
good.
things.
That's
You know what I
good.
mean? Find ways to help them debrief, because sometimes this stuff is I mean, honestly, I understand slavery and, oppression and segregation and the civil rights movement.
Mhm.
And we talk about this all the time. I'm African American, so this is not something new to me. And we've been having conversations since I was 5, right? Like, in some way, I understand the work that Dr. King did for my life in a different way than someone who isn't African American,
Sure.
right? So this is a lifelong journey. For some people who are curious, this is a brand new awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't flood them with 5 million pieces of information. I just think that what I have found has been helpful is to, give little bits of information. I've sent books to people or asked a question or had lunch with someone who showed some interest in a curiosity, and honestly be in their space.
Mm-hmm.
Be willing to go where they are. I went to a concert I probably wouldn't have gone to previously, but it came as a result of a relationship with someone that I didn't even know 12 months ago. And so she and I connected around racial issues. And because of that relationship, I was able to go to the concert. And so I think getting outside your box is a part of that. But I think it's going to take you being an actual friend.
Yeah.
And
Goes both
um,
ways.
yeah, it absolutely does. It absolutely does.
Ah, this has been I love our conversations. I always learn
I do
something. There are some great quotes in there, and we'll be sure to link to some of the resources you're talking about, to conversation starters, experiences that you can have together. I really like that. Don't expect the person to do it all on their own.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Um, well, Erica, if you had to pick, I know there's no magic bullet solution to diversity,
Mm.
inclusion, and something like race is incredibly intricate. But if you had to make one recommendation to our listeners, what would it be?
Wow. Um,
There's no right or wrong answer.
there's a lot. I would really I do this with finances. I have people do a reality check to see where all of their money is going. Add up all of your expenses by category to see the true nature of where your money is going. And I think it's very valid here for people to take an inventory of their friendships, the people that they come into contact with, and see how diverse it is currently,
Hmm.
and what might need some help. So, for instance, when you go to a place of worship, how diverse is that space on Sunday morning? When you go to your kid's school for a concert, how diverse is that space? Um, when you go to work, how diverse is that space? And if there's something about it that you don't like and you want it to be more diverse, just start thinking inwardly about what it is that you can do to make a difference in that
I like
area.
that. I like
And
that.
I think so it might mean inviting someone in, or for a career day, having someone shadow you for the day who's different from you, or you know what I mean? Like, I think we
Hmm.
just need to think outside the box on how it has to happen. But I think looking at your current space to understand, how diverse is it? Who do you call a real friend? And can that be more inclusive of people that aren't like you?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And I took that inventory myself. I mean, it was more from a friend and business perspective, but I was really, and I don't want to say I've arrived, because we've never arrived. I gotta be careful here. I'm not some sort of white savior. That mentality is not what I'm advertising. But I went to a networking event a year ago, and it was a lot of diverse types of women here. And I spent almost the whole night with women of color. And I walked
Oh,
away feeling so
wow.
energized, like it's working, like I'm trying. And
Yes.
It's not that hard, honestly.
Well, you know what's interesting is you took that inventory 2 years ago, and now you're comfortable in a space where you spoke mostly during this networking meeting to people who didn't look like you. Like it was
Mhm.
comfortable, it wasn't uncomfortable. And I think we have to realize that the more we get uncomfortable, the more comfortable it will become, right?
Yes.
Like it's just going to be easy. You're not going to think twice about it.
No.
And therefore, you can see their color and appreciate their color, but it never holds you back from whatever the relationship needs to be,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
It,
that's the difference.
it felt so much more comfortable just in a year's time. So I have to think, and it's a journey and it's going to get easier over time. And I need to work on other elements of diversity too. So we don't get to call ourselves an ally when our work is done. And I think that's why it's hard stuff. This is why people don't get as engaged as they could be. But
Right.
promise you, take any one of the nuggets that, Erica shared today, listeners, and you can do it too. Well,
Absolutely.
Erica, how can people get in touch with you? What's the best way to connect?
Well, my website, you can find me at tailormadebudgets.com, and you can email me, Erica, Erica, at tailormadebudgets.com as well. I'm on LinkedIn. I am improving on Instagram, so I'm excited about that. So you'll find me in those places, tailormadebudgets.com on Instagram and on Facebook as well. Same
Yep.
thing.
Yep. And she spells her name with a K. So Erick if you're looking for her.
That's it.
Well, awesome. Thanks for being with us today.
This was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Did you know that you can find all 5 seasons of our 50 plus episodes at nextpivotpoint.com? And you can sign up for our complimentary 7-day preview of our new program, Lead Like an Ally, and order your new book, Lead Like an Ally. I appreciate you listening to this episode. Who do you know that needs to hear this message? Hit the share button and connect with me on LinkedIn. Simply search Julie Kratz, Kratz. I post every single day. I host this podcast because I believe we are stronger together. We are one.